The small country of Portugal lies at the far southwest of continental Europe. Human habitation goes back 400,000 years, as evidenced by archaeological sites found throughout the country. The first major cultural shift started around 5000 BCE near modern Hallstatt, Switzerland, when Celtic tribes expanded over most of continental Europe, including the Iberian Peninsula, with the notable exception of the tenacious Lusitanian pre-Celtic culture. Celtic megaliths can still be found. Meanwhile, in the far eastern Mediterranean, Phoenician prowess as seafarers was expanding, and they started exploring and colonizing. Around 600 BCE, the Phoenician homeland was conquered, giving independence to the colonies, with Carthage the most powerful. Its significant neighbors were the Greek city-state of Syracuse and a little kingdom called Rome. Over the next 300 years, Carthaginian influence expanded, subjugating some of the Iberian Celtic tribes. Rome also expanded, sparking the First Punic War primarily over the island of Sicily. Rome captured Carthaginian territory, and Carthage expanded into Iberia, with Lusitania notably keeping its autonomy. The Second Punic War started with the Carthaginian general Hannibal and his elephants crossing the Alps and terrorizing Rome. Ultimately, Rome won again, and Carthage was left with very little territory. The Third Punic War destroyed Carthage, and Rome was free to expand in the Iberian Peninsula. Even the tenacious Lusitanians succumbed to Roman might, and by the dawn of the Roman Empire, they controlled all of the Iberian Peninsula by 25 BCE. With Rome's decline in the 4th century, Germanic tribes moved into Iberia. Visigoths invaded after Rome's fall in 479, wiping out the Vandals and Alans, and eventually annexing the Suevi. Meanwhile, the new religion of Islam was spreading in the east, reaching northwest Africa by 711 CE. First establishing an Iberian beachhead in Gibraltar, by 750 CE they had conquered nearly all of the Iberian Peninsula, naming this domain Al-Andalus. The Kingdom of Asturias was the lone Visigothic Christian holdout against the Islamic advance, and they spurred the Reconquista of the Christian kingdoms, slowly taking back Iberian land. The county of Portugal was formed in 868 CE under King Alfonso III of Asturias, becoming a kingdom in its own right in 1140. By 1292, Portugal had reached its current borders, and the Reconquista was completed by the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492. In 1415, Portugal's imperial ambitions began with the Islamic port of Ceuta, a base for pirates raiding Portugal's coast. Prince Dom Henrique pushed for the action, and with this success, he backed additional expeditions that greatly expanded the European known world. History knows him as Prince Henry the Navigator. Arguin was settled in 1448 as a slave trade outpost, which funded further expeditions. By the end of Henry's life in 1460, the Azores were settled, the Sargasso Sea discovered, and more of the West African coast was mapped. Henry's legacy was the European age of exploration, with Portugal leading the way. Settling Cape Verde and capturing new territory in Morocco, Portuguese were the first to round the Horn of Africa in 1488. Then in 1492, Spain entered the picture with Christopher Columbus's expedition. And the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas brazenly divided all non-Christian lands between the two countries. Exploration continued, with Vasco da Gama reaching India in 1498. Portugal expanded their empire through Asia, securing access to the coveted spices and silks. In Africa, Portugal colonized along its route to Asia and expanded its slave trade, going inland through the 19th century. In 1500, Pedro Alvarez Cabral, whether by accident or design, sailed west from the Cape Verde Islands and discovered Brazil, before turning back towards Africa. Portugal was the first global empire, with lands in 4 continents, and Brazil was the New World's largest market for slave labor for 300 years. Portugal's empire would decline in the 17th century. Their Asia trading routes were enormously profitable, and the Dutch and British wanted to get in on the game. The 60-year Dutch-Portuguese War ended Portugal's prominence in Asia. The first casualty was Kozhikode in 1602, followed by the Moluccas in 1605, Malacca in 1641, and Sri Lanka in 1658. Dutch allies, the British, took down Portugal and Oman and Yemen in 1650, and Bombay in 1661. Portugal held on to Goa until independent India annexed it in 1961. Indonesia invaded Portuguese Timor in 1975, and Macau was peacefully handed back to China in 1999. Brazil then became the most important Portuguese colony, and a much weaker Portuguese empire relocated there after Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Portugal in 1808. They were too weak to survive the anti-colonialism wave following the American Revolution, and Brazil won independence in 1822. Portugal lost all land in Morocco by 1769, but held on to sub-Saharan Africa until the 1970s. Guinea-Bissau went first in 1974, and Cape Verde, Sao Tome and Principe, Mozambique, and Angola all in 1975. Just over 4 centuries after establishing its global empire, Portugal was back to before the age of exploration.